Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. It has been a while since we've made a video, and please just understand that that is not because we have not been busy. It's actually quite the opposite. We have been making a ton of progress, lots of things have happening, and really excited to share kind of where we're at, where we're going with this build, and all the progress, and have you all follow us along every step of the way. Before we get into all of that, I do just want to highlight that we will make an individual video for each of the different key components to the build. So when we get into the motor, the axles, fabrication, all the way through till this thing is back rolling, and then obviously once we're starting to hit some trails with it, we will have individual videos for each of those. And this is really video one, kicking off our 2024 SEMA build, first ever Jeep Grand Cherokee Trailhawk, one of a kind, solid axle swap, 40-inch tires. Ultimately, we're going to end up putting a pretty ridiculous motor in it as well. But let's jump into the video and let's talk about how we got there. So, as you've seen, if you've been following some of our videos, all of this has kind of been in the back of our head for a while. We really wanted to push this platform in our backyard. We have the Rubicon, we have Fordyce, we have these just world-renowned off-road trails. And yes, I've had a quote-unquote traditional Jeep before. Actually, my first vehicle was a 98 TJ Jeep Wrangler. And you know, now that I'm older and have a family, we decided to go with the Grand Cherokee as our platform. And really, it was just a family vehicle, has something to get us out into the foothills, into Sierras, and be able to, you know, kind of expand what we do. I'm a big outdoors person, enjoy hiking, just going on adventures, skiing, snowboarding. You know, that's been a big part of my life. It's something that I share with my children. And so initially it was just, you know, how do we get a vehicle that can get us to those places? And with anybody that's done a build before, it starts small and builds and more and more and more. And as that build has progressed over the years, we originally were looking at how do we do some type of long travel platform for the vehicle, and what could that look like? And explored that quite a bit, had some partners that we talked to. We were also then kind of interested as we looked around of you know, what are some other modifications that can give us some more clearance, and just really kind of didn't see a lot of options out there. We do have a 2017 Grand Cherokee Trailhawk that does come with the stock air suspension. We knew going in that it was a matter of if, but when that air suspension was going to go and fail on us. And so we kind of knew that was coming, especially the way that we go off-roading and the trails that we were hitting. And so, as I said, the original thought was, how do we do, you know, a long travel system on this? It is IFS front and rear for those that don't have a Grand Cherokee platform. So kind of, you know, it lends itself to maybe making that work. But the problem is it's IFS front and rear. And with the electronic slip differential, you know, we really were struggling to figure out in the back what we would do if we were to run some type of long travel. And again, as we got into it, you look at the fabrication it's going to take on there. Felt pretty confident around our power plant. Felt pretty confident that our differentials. So really, when we were thinking long travel, it was how do we get some high strength axle shaft, something custom, and you know, with that, you have some computer things that you need to work out, but we felt like on the computer side, that was kind of an easier, maybe hill to climb. But again, in the rear, the way that door is, if you're not actually extending the drive shafts at all, the amount of articulation that you're going to gain from a long travel system is somewhat limited just by the body style on these Grand Cherokees. And so with that, again, the front felt like it was an easier long travel area. We could make that work. But with the back, if you have to start extending the drive line, trying to push those back, you know, what does that look like to really get the most out of it? We even went as far as contacting 74 Welds and looked at their portals to see if that could be a solution to get us where we wanted to go. 74 Weld, while they do not make a specific Grand Cherokee portal, they said they could fabricate something for us if we gave them all the dimensions. But that just did not seem like a viable option because we were quoted anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 a tire for the 74 Welds if we went that way. And then you've got shock, suspension, shafts. You got all these other things that go into it really quickly. That just was not an attainable option. So still, this has been floating around the back of our minds for a long, long time. And we just said, let's keep investigating, but we'll really tackle this when the air suspension fails. So that whole story was documented in a previous video. You can check it out here. But neither there nor here. The air suspension finally failed us. We made it home, and we said, all right, it's time to figure this out. So what was the move? Still did not have a good option, we felt, a good path to make a long travel system work. And we've been really excited, actually, by the build that has been shared on social media. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link to the video. But Goon Squad did make a form of a long travel on their Baja Hawk, is what they're calling it, and that's on their Trackhawk that they did some custom suspension on. And again, while for us in our applications in the off-roading that we do, that did not seem to be the correct path. So what ends up happening is kind of a series of events. I had a buddy who was looking at solid axling, their Tacoma, and he had sitting around a 2010 Super Duty. That's your 110 tons. You got the Dana 60 front and Sterling 10.5 rear. Because it's a friend, we said, hey, what would that look like? And shout out to Charo, shout out to Raul, the Four Los Copas crew. We came over, had some adult beverages, and we just kind of went through and put together this spreadsheet. I'm showing it here for you. Showed this spreadsheet, and we built it. We said, what would it take? What are the pieces that it would take? And what would be the cost if we were going to actually put this F-250 Super Duty 1-ton axles into the Grand Cherokee, and again, making this the first ever solid axle swap. So here is the spreadsheet. I'm just going to show you kind of our thinking, what we landed on, some initial costs. Some of this stuff was going to have to be custom, and so we just did it at the sales cost, what it would be, and again, kind of started throwing together our list of what it would take. So you have that Ford 1-ton. It came with the brakes, fully put together. We obviously wouldn't need to build it out, but that platform was there, and so that was what we really built this off of. Because of this process and the fact that we want this to be a SEMA build, want it to be something that is also not just way over the top and you can't actually use it. We want it to be functional. We want to be able to go out, hit these hard trails, come back home, and then maybe the next weekend go on a long overland style trip, several days covering hundreds of miles. And so as we kind of put this together, it was this like Rocklander type of build that we were going for. So we categorize this by our absolute needs if we were going to do this, and then our wants on the right. And there's been a lot of learning through this whole process, but again, this is that initial spreadsheet, and then I'll talk about the individual components. So we have the Dana 60 axles. We decided to run E-locker front and rear, and the challenge with that, which we get into a little bit later, is as we started looking at changing, sticking with that Sterling 10.5, there is no aftermarket E-locker available for the 10.5 Sterling rear. So we did go with the Ford OEM E-locker, the pigtails, the whole kit, all there. So Eaton E-locker, Ford OEM in the rear. And then after a lot of consultation with a lot of different companies, and this may make more sense as you see eventually the power plant that we put on this truck and this build, but looked at 488 gears front and rear. Essentially getting to that 3-4 link, depending on where things land. We have the Summit Machine flex joints, and I'll walk you through each of these. We really couldn't put a price on the shocks and coilovers or springs, and just because we have no idea what that will ultimately look like. I think the goal here is to run 14-inch coilovers, and that will require us to do some cutting in the hood. It will require us to go back into the trunk compartment in the rear, but I think we're shooting for the 14s. It felt like 16s might be a little too much given the horsepower and the flex that we're going to have on this. And it felt like 12s wasn't quite enough to get some of the clearance and articulation that we wanted. So shooting for 14s, that is still up in the air. We'll get to that as kind of like the third or fourth video in this build series. Limiting straps, so we just again pulled from WFO. They make a great product. They're here local, and obviously needing 4 of those. Anti-rock sway bars, they make a kit for the JK. Not really sure what this will run us, as again, this will be somewhat of a custom application, and a little bit unclear if or what that will even look like when we get down that road. Tires, the plan for the tires is 40 by 13.5 on 17-inch rims. Again, just throwing out very basic prices here. We know that depending on your tire selection with 40s, 500 is on the low end of the spectrum. You can go anywhere from $500 to over $1,000 a tire for these 40s. Wheels, looking at, again, beadlocks, 17-inch rims, something that will support the off-roading that we do, and also work with the 8 lugs, the 8x170. A little typo here, but what was unfortunate is we had just got a pair, a whole set, 5 KMC grenade crawl beadlocks. Absolutely love the rims, but unfortunately, different lug pattern. Have to sell those, turn around and buy another whole set of wheels. After a lot of investigation, a lot of phone calls, we did find out that the WK2 transfer case, I'm sorry, I should say the HP70 transmission is a direct bolt-on to the JK transfer case. Now, anybody that's run the JK transfer cases knows that they have had some issues historically over the years, and particularly as we're looking at 40-inch tires, increasing the horsepower significantly. We really wanted to make sure we were not having any internal failures with the transfer case. Had lots of conversations with Atlas and have decided to go with essentially a JK Atlas transfer case with some custom components built into it. And so there's the price of what that transfer case will run us. We'll need a custom drive line. There's no getting around it. The WK2 has a kind of a unique driveline setup, which I'll talk about in another video. All of that's coming out. I'm going to go with a custom drive shaft and drive line. And this was another one where we had no idea what the costs are going to be, and so we just put a stock price on there. For our brake lines, it does come the brake kit. It does come with on the axles, the brake, the drums and rotors. We put this Willwood e-parking brake. Willwood makes a great Dana 60 and Sterling 10.5 brake kits, but that is going to kind of fall in that once list. We feel that our current brake set will be plenty, but we will need to do some work on those brake lines to make it compatible with the Jeep platform. Well, we already do have a Switch Pro SP9100. Unfortunately, that guy is going to be pretty much maxed out as it is currently. Adding the e-lockers front and rear, and then wanting to do a couple other little custom things through the processes of this build. We do think we're going to probably end up needing another Switch Pro. And then the PSC Hydro Kit for steering. Felt like this list here, without taking into account the fabrication, but just from a parts perspective, this is what we need to make this solid axle kit work, fit. And so including the solid axles, including these components, again, keeping the stock power plant and only changing the transfer case, That is the cost that we're running into, again, without any sponsorships, any partnerships, and not taking into account your shocks and coilovers. I think it's safe to assume that would probably cost about $30,000. And a lot of people have been asking questions, how much is this going to cost? What does it look like? So that was the number that we landed on to complete this solid axle swap. Again, not factoring in any of the fabrication and or putting anything from our wants list on here. So what's on the wants list? Again, sky's the limit. What would it look like? Well, I think we'll start here with the supercharger. We have a 5.7 Hemi. That thing, you could stroke it out. You could add a supercharger. You know, there is a lot of horsepower capability within that 5.7. Very, I wouldn't say easily, but very possible to put that 5.7 Hemi and get it to produce anywhere from 700 to 800 horsepower with some pulleys, supercharger, like I said, and a stroker and a couple other things. That was the superchargers. Like if we keep the 5.7, how do we maximize it? Definitely not needed. Solid axle is plenty of money. Let's get all that right. But if we're going to go down that route, this is kind of a nice little want item. Now I put the Borla exhaust there because we've always had a Borla exhaust on all of our rigs over the years. We have it currently on the Grand Cherokee. Just looked at some type of custom application with our existing Borla exhaust, or if we were to do something even above that in terms of the motor, then making sure that Borla exhaust kind of stayed with it. Another want is some long tube headers could be another item that we throw in here. Again, certainly not necessary, but just something that's been kicking around. Sticking with the axles themselves, one of the things that we really want to be intentional with on this build is how do we make it as as reliable as possible, and reliable is all coming with an asterisk when we're doing something like this. But how do you not spend all this money on all these parts, fabrication, go out your first time, and all of a sudden you just destroy your axle shafts, right? Or your ring and pinion just completely goes apart, or whatever it may be. So when we were looking through and kind of in that same vein, we said, well, geez, you do all this fabrication, you get the solid axles. What happens if the motor, the notorious Hemi tick kicks in at 10, 15,000 miles down the road, and we're back out of commission for a long time? And we have this unique opportunity where we're going to be able to fabricate a custom K-member and really do some different things in that engine compartment. And so a big, not want, but a big need was potentially a motor swap. Because we said if we do the motor swap, now at this point, we've got an entire brand new drivetrain power platform on top of brand new custom axles. Essentially, we've got a new vehicle on our hands. And obviously also recognize it's a unique vehicle to say the least. So if we were to put in this 426, and we looked at doing a couple short block builds, and the cost just escalated so quickly that it felt like if we were going to do anything in the motor bay that got us to like a new motor, then why not just make the jump and go to the whole 426. HHP out of Delaware makes this 426 behemoth. It is essentially a elephant motor out of the box, completely built, brand new, and ready for a significant amount of horsepower. Now, going back, if we're going to make that jump, if we're going to put a supercharger on top of that, well, you better make sure your axle shafts are taken care of. And so these RCVs in the front, RCV does not make anything for the Sterling 10.5 rear. And so we felt like these axle shafts were, as this idea and this build started progressing, went from this want list to a need list. We also upgraded it. RCV makes a couple different axle shafts, which I'll show you. But we ended up upgrading from just the simple Dana 60 CVs that they make, instead going to the Big Bell 40 spline axles that the RCVs make, and then a Yukon Sterling 10.5 chromoly shafts in the rear. Made those pretty bulletproof, to say the least. So let's jump into those other items and some of the things that we've been working on. So as I kind of alluded to, yes, this is the plan, thanks to High Horse Performance out of Delaware, swapping in the 426 Hemi Behemoth long block stroker engine, supercharging that, again, making this, from what we've seen, the only 5.7 Hemi to swap and put in this 426 Hemi Behemoth motor. And again, doing some custom things. You'll notice because of the K-member, it's not shown here obviously, but because of the K-member on the WK2 platform, all of these long block Gen 3 Hemis tend to have this front sup down here for your oil. And as you can imagine, whether you are drag racing and putting an incredible amount of speed very quickly, or you're rock crawling with where your nose and the front of that motor is up in the air, preferably you would run a rear sump on these motors. Now, the issue with that is because of where the K-member in the suspension lands, you just cannot run a rear sup with these platforms. Well, since we're doing a custom K-member, and because of all the OEM suspension components going away, we are able to actually run a rear sup on this motor. It's something that is a little bit of a custom application, but something we're really, really excited for, particularly when we talk about the functionality. Now with this motor, we're looking at the Magnuson Magnum TVS 2650 supercharger kit here. This combination of the supercharger, motor, then as you get into the pulleys, can easily put out over 800 horsepower. And you think about moving these 40-inch tires, it will just be one incredible ride and something that we cannot wait to experience when this thing is all said and done. So that led to, well, you've got your motor, you've got your transfer case, we've got our suspension figured out, but now all of a sudden we got this HP70 transmission, and we have putting a lot of stress on it. And is this going to be okay? We spent a lot of time and a lot of conversations and a lot of research looking at, do we do a transmission swap and putting in a Trailhawk transmission or a TRX transmission, the 8HP 95. But a couple factors really played into our decision here. First and foremost, that HP 95 is a dime a dozen. You've got the Trailhawk, you've got the TRX, and that is about it that is running that four-wheel drive transmission. And so if we were to go down that route, it is hard to find and it is incredibly expensive. And if you were looking to get it built, because you could get it out of the box, but then to get it built, there's a lot of questions of what are the internals looking like if you are getting a used 8 HP 95 transmission. Because it could look great on the exterior, but until you really get in there and take it apart, you have no idea what you're getting. So, for example, I can find some of these on eBay anywhere from $5,000–$6,000, but no idea in terms of the actual damage to the transmission. If you go out and get a new one, we don't have a core, and so that also drives up the cost substantially. And so then we said, what is the requirement? Do we have to make that swap or not? Again, a lot of respected people spoke to on this. Spoke to our friends at Southern Hot Rod who work on transmissions every day of the week. Spoke to Josh over at HHP. And how we decided to keep our transmission, here was the factors that went into play. Number one, we're doing a motor swap. We're doing solid axles. There was a lot of computer things that will need to be addressed. By not swapping the transmission, we can eliminate a whole range of issues or unaccounted for factors and really narrow it into, okay, is it something in the motor? Is it some threshold here that needs to be adjusted or altered? Or is it coming from, say, an ABS that we've deleted? Instead of now adding all of the transmission and all the computer programming for that transmission control module as just another variable in this build. So one was just from a practical standpoint to get this thing actually moving. That could be a phase 2 of the build if absolutely necessary. And then both Josh and particularly Southern Hot Rod really made the point that, look, if we're drag racing this thing and really pushing that behemoth motor 8, 9, over 1,000 horsepower, trying to go the speed of light, well, yeah, absolutely need to change the transmission. But for our application, what we're using this for, it is likely that HP70 transmission is going to be able to do the job. Now, the Jeep currently has about 50,000 miles on it, just over. We are, given the amount of horsepower and torque that will be running through that transmission, we are going to get it built by the folks there at Southern Hot Rod and make that as bomb-proof as possible and really give us kind of a clean slate with that HP70. But feel like this is a viable option. And this was a difficult factor. The third reason that we didn't go with this was because it would need some additional fabrication. And yes, I recognize now would be the time to do it. But that HP95 transmission is a different size. That was really hard to find for some reason. As I scoured all the forums, it is a different size than this 8HP70. So while the transfer case would be a direct bolt-on, it is a different length. And so that would also impact some of the fabrication that we have going on under the Jeep. So back into the axles, like I said, went with the Big Bell 40 spline CV axles for a Ford F-250. That, again, we're coming off a 2010. So excited to get these in. This has been the longest lead time item by far. We were quoted 4 to 6 weeks. We're now going beyond 10 weeks and still have another 2 weeks, was what we're told on that update. What I will say with RCVs, they make an incredible product, but if you're getting one of their one-off products, be prepared to be patient, because this is not a we'll send it to you tomorrow type of item. We do feel in the front with these and with the rebuild kits that we got from Yukon that these are going to be pretty bomb-proof axles. We also, in kind of our vein of thinking here, was let's make the axles as bomb-proof as possible. You've got a ton of horsepower, a ton of torque, you've got giant tires. We don't want any of the internals breaking on a trail. If anything's going to break, we want the fail point to be that drive line, that drive shaft that we can do a quick repair, quick removal, and be on our way limping home instead of, say, a ring and pinion or an axle shaft out on the side of a trail. So that's kind of why we overbuilt, I think, a lot of these axles. And I got to say, in terms of customer service, the folks at Yukon Gear and Axle, we cannot thank those guys enough. Countless times just picking their brain, going back and forth on the application, their warranty, their customer service, their willingness to just offer up shops in our area, other people that we can seek advice from. These guys, man, oh man, I tell you, they are top of the line. And if you ever need any gear axles, I'll refer them till the end of time, because they took care of us immensely. And so we've got the diff covers from them. As I said, we've got the chromoly shaft in the rear. We did end up going with their rebuild kits as well. And so Yukon Gear and Axle got us completely dialed in. We did, as I said, there is no aftermarket e-locker for the Sterling rear. So we did go with the Ford OEM e-locker setup, pigtail, everything, the housing, all of that. And just a shout out to DF Fabrication, a local company here in Sacramento, had the product. Again, great customer service. Put in a quick order and had it turned around the next day and really excited for how that piece played out. We'll have a lot more on the axle components. We'll have a whole separate video where we go in depth of what this axle build looked like. Here's some of those flex joints that I was talking about on that initial need list. Ordered some of the large flex joints. That'll come in fabrication much later, but these are going to be an essential component for that build. You've got the Atlas transfer case. This is kind of the base that you have for the JK. This is a direct bolt-on for the 8 HP70 transmission. With that being said, though, you call Atlas, the advanced adapters folks, and they will get you dialed in and really made it work for our application. The full hydro steering kit for 40-inch tires, so you can see that kit from PSC. That's on order. That comes a little bit later, but that whole kit is where we went to get these tires moving in the direction that we want. Here is a quick write-up of our Mishimoto order that we put in. We had a lot of items from Mishimoto, and so you could see what that looks like right there. So we needed, as we went down this route with the motor swap, really needed to ensure that we had the cooling components in place. And so you can see we went the oil cooler, transmission cooler, knowing that we were doing the supercharger. We have the icebox tank reservoir that we got 5 gallon, hoping that will fit. But that air-to-water intercooler was going to be an essential component there, and just all the different pieces. Performance radiator, Mishimoto again, top of the line. I think I probably spent 3 hours just going through the build and really having them tailor this order to our application. So Mishimoto, great company, pleasure to work with, and really excited for that partnership. And for our wheels, did go with the Raceline B-Locks. These RT 951B Rhinocast B-Locks are something we're really excited about. We've always ran KMCs, but man, Raceline just won us over with their customer service and with their support of this build. So that's what we went with. And really excited. So with that, this has been a far longer video than we wanted to. We'll talk about some of these components in more detail and individually, but just wanted to go over each and every step of high level, how we landed on each of these different pieces and why we chose what we did. Please leave a comment down below with any questions of why we chose one thing versus another. We're happy to share our train of thinking. But again, I mean, this all started with a couple buddies sitting around some adult beverages and saying, wonder what it would take to do a solid axle and be the first ever. And, this was that initial list that we put together. And as I said, as the build gets going, some things changed and got a little different and kind of more and more outside the box. But this was phase one. And so thank you guys for following. Be sure to subscribe. Be on the lookout. We will start now officially releasing a video a week. Up next will be the engine removal, engine transmission transfer case. Show you that process. Went down to our buddies at Beast Fab and got the motor out. So that'll be next. That will be followed by our axle build. And then we'll talk about kind of the next steps in the engine build process. So we'll make sure we have separate threads for all parts of this build, and we'll make sure we document everything every step of the way of what's coming. So thank you all, and look forward to sharing the rest of this process with you.